Hello, everyone. A pleasant day to all the viewers, students, and to, of course, my professor, Dr. Sefirina Renario. I am teacher John Rex, a Master of Arts in English Language Teaching student. So, before we proceed to the next slide, I want to ask you this. Why is it important to facilitate learning? Any answer? Okay, that's right. So when teachers and educational leaders facilitate learning, they create students who learn how to rationally question things around them, right? So this makes them into more intelligent, critically thinking adults who will go on to make positive adjustments and changes wherever life leads them. So for you to better facilitate learning, listen carefully and attentively. We will now be proceeding to our lesson, How Learning is Facilitated. Are you ready to go? Okay, let us start now. When you are learning a language, you will frequently meet the terms approach, methods, techniques, or strategies. I assume you are not really that familiar with these terms and hardly find the differences between each of them. An approach is philosophical. It is treating something in a certain way. This explains why we teach that way, and also approaches deal with general philosophy of teaching. While on the other side, methods. Methods are procedural. Method is a way that something is done in the way we teach. Perhaps the latter deals with more practical nuts and bolts, and it is used for a systematic routine tasks. And finally, techniques or strategies. These are skills in completing a task, a specific task. It is very specific. It can be a strategy or a trick that is designed to accomplish an immediate objective, deriving from practice to familiarity. To make this easy for you, I will give you an example. I have here a whole language approach. A whole language classroom focuses on providing hands-on experiences for children to learn language arts. Whole language puts into practice by John Dewey, emphasis on learning by doing. The best method for this whole language approach is the deductive method. Deductive method is concerned with hypothesis based on existing theory. Deductive theory moves from broad generalizations to specific observations. So the best technique for this whole language approach is reading of the whole story first before doing anything else. Is that clear? Okay, let's continue. Okay, so next we have here the learning philosophies of education. We will deal first with the lead approach, followed by the comparison of traditional and constructivism, and so on. So, are you class ready to go? Come on. Okay, so now let's proceed to the lead approach. Okay, so this lead approach is a unique learning and development framework that teaches ways to increase influence and to master the skills required to lead in today's complex competence. And this approach is currently used in the field of constructivism. Yes, that's right. So, what is constructivism, by the way? Okay, so constructivism is an important learning theory that educators or I, as an educator, use for my students to learn or to help their students. Constructivism is based on the idea that people actively construct or make their own knowledge, and that reality is determined by your experiences as a learner. So basically, learners use their previous knowledge as a foundation and build on it with new things that they learn. So everyone's individual experiences make their learning unique to them. In this learning theory, we are active creators of our own knowledge. And to do that, we must ask questions, we must explore, and we must assess what we know. As teachers, we must encourage students to use active techniques of learning, to explore meaning of what they are doing in order to construct their own understanding. Simply put, this approach, lead approach, is a construction of knowledge and not the feeding of knowledge. Is that clear? Okay, thank you. Let's proceed to another learning and philosophy of education, the traditional teaching versus constructivism, on the next slide. Okay, so next we have here the comparison between traditional teaching and constructivism. So these two are very useful in education and they are both usable. However, one is very effective and efficient for both teachers and students. Let us all find that out. Okay, so a constructivist classroom is a learner-centered. Students are active learners and not just recipients of information. In constructivism, the teacher facilitates and guides students to learning. On the other hand, traditional classroom is more on direct instruction and teacher-centered. Students are passive learner and it's the teacher that directs and controls most of the learning activities. A teacher in traditional classroom is the primary source of information and authority, while in a constructivist classroom, the teacher acts as a facilitator, assisting students in pursuit of knowledge. Traditional teachers disseminate knowledge, while constructivist teachers interact with students, helping them become constructor of knowledge or helping them construct their own learning. Students in a traditional classroom are passive. They listen and react to teachers' direct instruction. While in a constructivist classroom, students are very active. They exchange ideas with the teacher. In my point of view as a young educator, I prefer to use constructivism. Actually, I am applying and following constructivism in my teachings because in a constructivist classroom, learning is more on thinking and understanding and not just merely on rote memorization. Students in constructivist classroom are curious and they always ask questions. They enjoy learning and having a part in the exchange of ideas. They're all co-creators of ideas. It is not only to promote learning but also to promote social and communication skills. So that is the distinct differentiation of traditional teaching versus constructivism. And I know there are still a lot of specific differences of them, but I just gave you the general idea, the background, and the simple definition of each approach or learning. Okay? So now, are you ready to proceed for the recap about constructivism? Okay. Okay, so now let us have a recap on constructivism. In constructivism, learning is a result of mental construction, and constructivism is anchored in the schema theory, which describes the systematic patterns of thought and behavior that recognizes categories of information and the relationships among them. So this approach focuses on constructing of own understanding by reflecting on their personal experiences and by relating the new knowledge with what they already know. So Piaget's assimilation and accommodation help explain how meaning is constructed and the new concept formed. For example, would be how children learn about different types of animals. As a child might begin with a schema for a dog, which in the child's mind is a small, four-legged animal. As the child encounters new information in the world, the information can be assimilated or either be accommodated into this existing schema. When the child finally encounters a horse, he or she might assimilate this information and immediately call the animal a dog, right? So the process of accommodation then allows the child to adopt the existing schema to incorporate the knowledge that four-legged animals are horses. In each of these examples, the individual is adding information to their existing schema. Remember, if new experiences cause the person to alter or completely change their existing beliefs, then it is known as accommodation, and that is no longer assimilation. Excuse me. So this explains what constructivism is. So on the next page, you will be aware of the different approaches anchored on constructivism. So are you ready to go? Okay. Okay, so let me share to you some of the approaches anchored on constructivism. So the first one we have here, the whole language. So this is all about recognizing words as whole pieces of language. So the proponents of this approach believe that language should not be broken down into letters and combinations of letters decoded. Instead, they believe that language is a complete system of making meaning, with words functioning in relation to each other in a context. Okay? So the second approach is the multiple intelligences. So this is endowed with various intelligences. So this approach reminded teachers to use varied types of teaching methodologies and techniques that cater to the various intelligences of students. So according to Howard Gardner, the proponent of this theory, we have these 9 intelligences, and that teachers should look into account what type of methods and techniques teachers should use that best suits the learner's needs and learning styles. Okay? So the third approach is the differentiated instruction. This is all about the efforts to respond to variance among learners. So teachers here can differentiate at least 4 classroom elements based on students' readiness, interest, or learning profile. So the first element we have here is the content. It is what the student needs to learn or how the student will get access to the information. The second one is the process. It is all about the activities in which the student engages in order to make sense or to master the content. So they are connected. The third element we have here, the product or products. They are culminating projects that ask the student to rehearse, apply, and extend when he or she has learned in a unit. Okay? And the fourth one is the learning environment. It is the way the classroom works and feels. Okay? And now let's move on to the schema theory. And this is concerned with how the brain structures knowledge. So schema theory, or a scheme, is an abstract concept proposed by Jean Piaget to refer to our well-abstract concepts. Schemas or schemata are units of understanding that can be hierarchically categorized as well as webbed into complex relationships with one another. For example, Think of a house. A house. You probably get an immediate mental image of something out of a kid's storybook, like four windows, front door, suburban setting, chimney, and all. However, if I were to amend the object's name slightly, um, your scheme would shift to a more refined version. How about shotgun house? Like you would have one door, maybe no front door or front windows, low income setting, a mansion, multiple windows, side entrance for the help, sweeping front drive. Okay, so therefore, the most important rule for teaching based upon schema theory is make sure your students' existing schemas are up and running at a conscious level. Okay, remember that. And the last approach anchored in constructivism is the cooperative learning. So this is all about aiming to organize classroom activities into academic and social learning experiences. So in this approach, the idea of cooperative learning has been around for decades, right? But it never got to the same prominence as blended learning or differentiated instruction. Cooperative learning is based on group work, but it's also so much more than that. The core element of cooperative learning is to showcase the positive effects of interdependence while underlining the importance of personal responsibility. Well, this happens naturally in cooperative learning since students work with one another because of the word cooperative, cooperation. But they all have a different task to accomplish or concept to explain. And as a bonus, your students are being social while they're working in a cooperative learning, and that's the big advantage of this approach. And that could be an advantage or disadvantage maybe for you, depending on the class. Regardless, the experience of working socially can help students with soft skills, which is nice bonus to cooperative learning in general. Okay? So, later on, you will be introduced with the elements of cooperative learning. And I hope everything's clear here, right? Okay, so I guess you are ready to go. Okay, so we are down to the third last slide of this presentation. And this slide is all about the elements of cooperative learning. So we have here the first element, face-to-face interaction. So in face-to-face interaction, students are promoting each other's learning through face-to-face activities where they can discuss and explain assignment topics with each other. So the clue word for this face-to-face interaction is real-time discussion. And let's go to the second element, the positive interdependence. So positive interdependence, students can have the sense that they are in this together. The feeling that each member's individual effort will not only help them, but to the whole group. The group will be benefited, right? So the grade of each student is dependent upon the effort of other group members. So the clue word for this is in this together, okay? So the third element is individual accountability. Individual accountability, in this, student is accountable for their own contribution to the group. Clearly, this describes goals, ensure that each student knows what she is responsible for and what the group is responsible for. So the clue word for this is own contribution. Okay? So next element is group processing. So in group processing, students are given the means for analyzing their group for how well the group has learned and whether or not collaborative skills are being used. So the clue word for this group processing is analyzation of groups. Okay, am I too fast? Next is we have here the collaborative skills. In collaborative skills, students learn not only the subject matter, but interpersonal skills and how to work in teams. Students are taught skills on communication, leadership, and conflict management during the early stages of cooperative learning sessions. So the clue word for collaborative skills is interpersonal skills. Okay? And the other element is differentiated instruction. We have defined this a while ago, and this is all about responding to variance, okay? So let us just proceed to the next element, the English for specific purposes. So this is all about the thrust of this approach. It is to lend focus on the refinement of the teaching of English for a particular discipline. The clue word for this is refinement of English. Okay? Next element is the reflective teaching and learning. And this means that both the teacher and students look closely to what they do in the classroom, the connection. They think about what they do it, how they do it, and they think about it. Okay, this is a process of self-observation and self-evaluation, self-correction, and internalizing insights gained and apply them in a similar other situation and take it as a learning experience. So this is all about reflective teaching and learning. The clue word for this is about reflection. Okay. Next is discovery learning. In discovery learning, this is an active process of inquiry-based instruction that encourages learners to build on prior knowledge through experience and search for the information and relationships based on their interests. Based on their interests. And the theorist behind this is Jerome Bruner. Okay? And the clue word for this discovery learning is the inquiry-based instruction. Next element we have here is the modular approach. In modular approach is the design of equipment, the systems, the programs, and the like in which independently prepared and self-contained units or modules are combined to form the final product. Okay? And the clue word for this is self-contained units. That is all about modular approach. Next, we have here the next element, experiential learning. So this involves learning from experience, from the word itself. It is all about learning from experience. And next, we have here the concept learning. This is known as category learning, concept attainment, and concept formation. It is also largely based on the works of the cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner again. Okay? The next is we have here the inquiry-based learning. This is another element. Inquiry-based learning starts by posing questions, problems, and scenarios rather than simply presenting established facts or portraying smooth path to knowledge. So the clue word for this is posing questions, okay? And down to the last element is the process approach. This is the application of a system of processes within an organization, together with the identification and interaction of these processes. And the process approach is the application of a system of processes within the organization, together with the identification and interaction of these processes and their management. So the clue word for this is the application of system. Okay? So you got it? So we will be proceeding to the second last slide. Are you ready? Okay. Okay, so we are now on the techniques anchored on approaches. So we have here the journal writing and the role playing. So in journal writing, this is a process of recording personal insights, reflections, and questions on assigned or personal topics. So journal writing is all about the event of your life. They are all events of your life, okay? While role playing, it is a learning structure that allows students to immediately apply content as they are put into the role of decision maker who must make a decision regarding policy, resource allocation, or some other outcome. Okay, so they are all the techniques anchored on approaches. And we also have here the methods popularly used. So these would probably be the methods used by most of the teachers. So we have here the lecture method. So this is very basic lecture method. The teacher gives instruction and the teacher is the one who's discussing to the students, giving information. And we have here the discussion method. Discussion method, this is not just a plain giving of instruction and information. This is an interaction between students and teachers. The teachers ask questions, pose questions, and then the students will answer. So this is interaction. Discussion has an interaction compared to lecture method where the teacher only gives instruction. Discussion method has the feedback or the answer of the students. That is the distinct differentiation of lecture and discussion method. We also have here the most popularly used demonstration lesson. Yes, demonstration. Next is brainstorming, role plays, cooperative learning, and group learning. Okay, so I hope you understand the information on this slide. Okay, so we will proceed to the other last slide. Okay, we are now finally down to the last slide. Okay, so before I end, I would like to remind you this, especially the teachers out there. So education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of fire. So teachers, our job is not to fill their heads, our students' heads, with knowledge, but to spark an interest and desire to learn about a subject. Okay, so thank you very much for listening, and to my professor, Dr. Seferina Renario, thank you so much, Doc. See you next time on my future lessons. Goodbye. Thank you so much for listening.